Hi, how's everybody doing today? This is Life Imitating Movies podcast where myself and my co-host over here, Mr. Mitch, there you go. We take news stories from the week and then we kind of relate them back to movies that have been released over the years. So first, how you doing today, Mitch?
Hanging in there, these days. I mean, I guess that's the best you can say, so doing good.
Yeah, man, same here. I'm going a little stir crazy, but that kind of leads into the first question, my opening question of the week, because I was doing my top 20 for 2020. I try and get that out by the time Oscar nominations are announced, and in doing that, I was going back and I was like, you know what, I want to do a top 20 from the year I was born on. And so that came, the question in my head was, what was your favorite movie from the year you were born? And so I'll let you go ahead and take that away.
All right. Well, I will say the runner-up for this, and I thought this was a good question, and I feel like this would be a fun game to play with family members or friends who are different ages than you. Not necessarily people you went to the same grade with, but I feel like this would be a fun game to play with family members. But I will say the runner-up for this answer is actually Aladdin, and it was close, but the pick I had for this question was my favorite movie, 1992, the year I was born, is Unforgiven with Clint Eastwood. And, I think it's a really good movie, but there's a little bit of a story behind it that I'll kind of run through where, this was where it all started for me, where I kind of figured out what I wanted to do with my career and kind of do in college of sorts, because I saw Unforgiven for the first time in Mr. Rice's intro to film class in high school. And, the way he kind of talked about movies and broke everything down, and it really kind of got me into film, which got me into video in a way. So it just, this is kind of where it all started. And Unforgiven, I really like as a movie as well. I think it's well acted, and it's kind of like an anti-Western, if that makes sense. It kind of upends all the tropes usually in Westerns.
Yeah, first, I'm surprised that you were showing that movie in high school. It's a pretty R-rated movie to be showing in a high school class. Best Picture winner, obviously, and Clint Eastwood won Best Director for that one. It's a solid choice. So that's the movie. That's the one that when people ask you what made you want to get into the movies, that's your example.
That was one of them in the class. Another one, he really kind of gave us some good movies to watch, and these were ones that I hadn't really seen for the first time until I took the class. Some other ones in the class, it was just the class as a whole that kind of got me into it, but some other ones in the class were obviously Unforgiven, Jaws, which I saw for the first time there, Kung Fu Hustle, which is a great Stephen Chow, kind of like Kung Fu, making fun of it at the same time movie. And also Raiders of the Lost Ark, if you can believe it. Indiana Jones, I'd never seen that movie until that class, so it was good to see that there.
Yeah. Those are That sounds like a good class. I took a in when I went to community college before I went to film school. We had I took a film history class, and we watched stuff like Body Heat, like film noir. What else? The original Scarface from like 1932 or something. Stuff like that. Yeah, we weren't watching like Unforgiven, which that sounds like a pretty solid class. But because I remember I had a teacher too in high school, and her name was Mrs. Freeman, and she knew my idol in life was Chris Farley, and so she let me bring in Tommy Boy because she hated Chris Farley, and we'd always talk about that. And so she let me bring in Tommy Boy one day, and we watched Tommy Boy in class. Just one of those garbage days where, like, where like you have a half day, so the class they're not teaching anything. So I brought in Tommy Boy, and after we finished watching Tommy Boy, she was like, "You know what, Brad? I think I actually like Chris Farley. I don't think I understood him before." And I'm like, "Right on, Mrs. Freeman." So I always remembered Mrs. Freeman. And her favorite movie was Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So, she had a good sense of humor. So I guess I'll continue that. My year, 1984, I was going through it, and it was a good year for movies, man. You had freaking The Natural, Temple of Doom, Terminator, Karate Kid, Spinal Tap, Police Academy. But I had to narrow it down to my top two. And the runner up is Ghostbusters. So my favorite movie from that year, Beverly Hills Cop. and it's just it might be because I just watched Beverly Hills. I watched the trilogy not long ago, so it's fresher in my head. My love for it is fresher in my head. Whereas Ghostbusters, I'm waiting for the new one to come out before I go back and watch the older one. So I haven't seen it in a while. But for me, man, it's a damn near perfect movie. The first Beverly Hills Cop. It is hilarious. It is like action packed. I don't know. Have you seen the Beverly Hills Cop movies?
I haven't, but I would say that Ghostbusters, if I had to pick one out of that bunch, would probably be my favorite from 1984.
You know what? It was a Sophie's choice for me. I'd be lying if I said I didn't sit at my computer for like, an hour going, which one, man, which one? And it's like such an arbitrary decision. And like I said, when I watch Ghostbusters coming up, it might flip flop. Ghostbusters may overtake it because it is a classic. But man, Beverly Hills Cop is just, if you want to watch kind of the original R-rated buddy comedy action hilarious movie, that's it. I think it's before. I'm pretty sure it's before Lethal Weapon. It's obviously before 48 Hours and all those movies. It's quintessential 80s action. All right, so to kick things off, we got our first story was a story I read during the week about how Chicago, Illinois, is planning on banning Grand Theft Auto 5 because this last year there was a rise in carjackings. Chicago, not known for violence. So the real point I wanted to make with that was like the year before it, they said the article says it was up 60% from 2019. So Grand Theft Auto 5 was released in 2013. So did people in Chicago just discover the game in 2020, and that's what led to carjackings? So what are your thoughts on this article? You're a gamer, right?
A little bit. I'm what people in the gaming community would call a filthy casual because I'm not like a hardcore video gamer. I just kind of pick up and play stuff that is either sports or just occasional things. But just to kind of blow through this really quick, two things about this. First, this always brings up the argument about whether video games are making people violent or lash out or act out, and it's ridiculous to begin with, but look, studies have been done. No, there is no causation or correlation between the two. And this is something I think somebody's pointing the finger and trying to put two things together that don't go together. And then second, just because carjackings and Grand Theft Auto might be there means people do it in real life. Well, this turns into a censorship conversation because then you have to ask the question, well, should we take all drugs out of movies, video games, and television shows? Should we take, all violence out? Should we take all depictions of war out or all depictions of sex? It's just, because things are shown in mediums doesn't mean people see that and then want to go out and imitate it. And, if you start to try and censor individual things like that, it just is going to lead down a path. And, this was just kind of like an eye-rolling thing where every once in a while somebody will bring up this topic and try and point the finger, and really what we should be doing is just teaching our kids the right lessons.
Yeah, that was pretty much what I was thinking when I read, because I was like, basically what they're trying to do is there's already a ban on these games from selling them to minors, which I agree with. The game is an adult rated. It's kind of like, you can't, a 12-year-old can't buy a ticket to an R-rated movie. A 12-year-old probably shouldn't be buying Grand Theft Auto 5. I agree with that. That's fine. That's what ratings are there for. But this ban is trying to say an adult. I'm 36. I can't walk into a store and go buy Grand Theft Auto if I want to. It's like that's where you get into those sticky wickets I don't like.
Yeah, it's ridiculous to kind of say that out loud, where you are going to walk into a store and buy Grand Theft Auto, play it, and as a result, will want to go steal a car in Chicago. It's ludicrous.
So, in terms of video games, I will say I'm not a gamer. Grand Theft Auto 5 is the only game since like the original Sega Genesis when I was a kid that I have played all the way through, and I've done it twice because I love Grand Theft Auto 5. I think as I have a dream. I have an idea in my head for how to translate it to a movie. And if I'm ever lucky enough to hit that level, I want to be the one who writes and directs the Grand Theft Auto movie because I have the idea in my head. And but it's the only game I've ever played fully through twice. Great game. What have you played the game? Are you?
No, I'm not a big Grand Theft Auto person. It takes a lot of hours to really sink in and get the full experience. And like I said, I'm a pretty casual video game person. I only play if I have a game that I like at the time, a couple hours a week maybe. But for this one, like I'm sure you maybe looked into some video game movies to kind of relate it to, because I know that's what I did for this one.
I did. So originally I was trying to find a good carjacking movie, and the only thing I could think of was Crash, and I hadn't seen it in a while, so I couldn't really talk intelligently about it because I hadn't seen it in a while. So I went with just one of my childhood favorite movies about video games, and that's The Wizard. You ever seen this one? No? Man, you're missing out. It's Fred Savage. He plays. It's about a kid who he's kind of like got autism, and he like runs away from home, and he's like phenomenal at video games. So he travels to California to take place in something called Video Armageddon, and the big brand new video game at Video Armageddon was Super Mario Brothers 3 for the original Nintendo system, and it was the introduction of the Power Glove. Do you know the Power Glove?
I know of it, sure.
So The Wizard was like this big Nintendo movie where they introduced Super Mario Brothers 3. That was like the big reveal back then and everything because nobody knew Super Mario Brothers 3 was coming out. And it was like the introduction to the Power Glove, which are you familiar with the Power Glove at all?
Yeah, I've heard of it. I can't say I've had any experience with it.
Yeah, it was a giant piece of crap. Like it didn't work, and that was like a big. But like I think right now on eBay, it like fetches high numbers because it's just cool looking. It's just a video game controller glove, and it's just an '80s movie, man. It's. I watched it recently because they literally just released this special edition Blu-ray like a few months ago, and it's just a great movie, man. It's if you like those childhood movies like a Sandlot or a Little Giants, or it's just a good PG childhood favorite of mine.
Good. I mean, people all have their movies like that they have fond childhood memories of. Even this one almost kind of sounds like it's a little exercise in product placement. They're advertising Super Mario Brothers and the Power Glove. It just sounds like, this movie was made to advertise those. But, this is the second such example of a movie showing off the Power Glove to try to market it that I've heard of, besides the infamous Nightmare on Elm Street movie that had that in it, and Freddy had the Power Glove, and he was using it to kill like one of the kids who was like obsessed with video games. So, it's funny that it's kind of infiltrated pop culture like that. Yeah, so for this one, like I said, I looked more at like video game movies, like mainstream ones that have come out like based on existing properties. So I don't know if you've looked at the list of video game movies that have come out, but there are a lot of duds. It's been notoriously hard to make a good video game based movie. And, this one, it's not great. I'll admit that, but it's in the same vein as yours where it's a childhood favorite. And that one is Pokemon, the first movie. So, this one's a little confusing because it's based on the TV show. It had the same characters in the TV show in this one. And the show is based off of the games. So, it's a video game movie. So, this one's a childhood favorite for me. Just going back in time when it was released, it was just such an event, as a kid, like to go see it and to see all the different merchandising with it on top of the already popular video game and trading cards and all that. And it just, it felt like a huge debut as a kid to kind of see that on the big screen and just kind of see this show that you've been watching and see, that in a theater. It was just an experience as a kid. Yeah, so when I went back and looked this one up and read some critic reviews from around that time when it came out, one of them said that if you're not a kid, there's little to get out of this movie. And I understand that. It was made for kids. It was made for fans of the TV show, for fans of the IP, of the Pokemon name. So I get that, it probably wasn't the best movie. I really haven't gone back and watched it in a long time, but I'm sure besides that nostalgia it brings back from childhood, that I'm sure it's not great, but it's my pick to kind of relate to this story. So we just kind of turned the calendar into March. So March is actually, for people who don't know, Women's History Month. So obviously celebrating a lot of women historical figures and just strong female characters and examples and people in real life, and just really kind of celebrating women. And obviously last month was Black History Month, and it's great to kind of see and celebrate the people who have flown under the radar in history for a long time, but now people are more aware of the struggles of these groups of people, and we're celebrating the good deeds that they did throughout history and the good examples of these people, women, minorities, and just everybody else that's really doing a lot to kind of help out everybody, especially during these difficult times.
Yeah. I didn't know there was a Women's History Month until it was on my calendar this year, and I was like, okay. Back to back, with Black History Month last year. I don't think you celebrate them or anything. Do you celebrate it's I like women. I appreciate women. I do, in last month with Black History Month, they had a lot of stories about things that, history, which is what I appreciate. I like learning about those things I haven't heard about before, and that's kind of what these appreciation months do. They allow you to delve into the history of people that you normally would not hear about. So I haven't heard much about any. There hasn't been that many stories. I don't think. I try and watch the news every night, but hasn't been really too many like women history stories I've seen.
I think as the month goes on, we'll see more of those kind of stories and celebrations of powerful women, and see on TV or movies kind of airing where those kind of figures are present. So I think as we go on, we'll see more of that during the month. But a good example of that would be, I'm sure there are going to be tributes to Ruth Bader Ginsburg all over the place, because obviously she recently passed, unfortunately. And actually, a few months back during the pandemic, I saw On the Basis of Sex, which is a good historical kind of biographical drama about her in her younger years as a lawyer, kind of fighting discrimination laws against women. And it's a very good movie if you like that sort of genre. But my pick for this is actually a powerful fictional woman. And, I've mentioned this movie a few times on the podcast, but we've never really kind of talked about it as one of my picks for a story. But it's actually Terminator 2 Judgment Day, because the character who I'm relating to Women's History Month is Sarah Connor, which is a favorite example of people when they look to movies and fictional women characters as powerful, strong females. Sarah Connor is up there, Ellen Ripley from Alien, obviously Wonder Woman with her popularity in the recent movies. So, she's one of those examples that people like to bring up, and deservedly so. She kicks a lot of ass in Terminator 2.
Yeah. I mean, so last week we had the question, which was, what was your first ever R-rated movie? And mine was Demolition Man. But the first ever R-rated movie that my father actually let me watch, was like, all right, you can watch this movie, was Terminator 2 Judgment Day. And I mean, it remains one of, if not the greatest action movie ever made. It is an epic movie. And that's what you said, man. It's like, I like Linda Hamilton, man. She was like the original badass. And I think, as we said earlier in this, which was 1984, the original Terminator came out. And then that movie was like such a step forward for special effects. But then when Terminator 2 came out, which was 1991, I believe, that like the special effects in that movie were like, it was like people had never seen it before. And if you think about special effects movies from back then to where we are now, like some movies look like garbage in comparison to now. But Terminator 2, man, those special effects hold up. They are gnarly.
Yeah, they still do. And, I like to point people towards Terminator 2 as an example of a great mix of practical and computer effects. And you're right, they still hold up today. People complain about too much CGI in some of today's movies or not enough practical effects, and this was just a really good mix of both. And I think it's a good example that you kind of mentioned Sarah Connor in the first one. She's almost kind of more of a victim, and then she kind of turns herself into a hardened, kind of soldier and really tough person in the second one. So it's a good journey that her character kind of goes through in those two movies. And if you're a big Terminator fan, you don't really like the sequels, you almost kind of look at that as her complete journey, just those two, because the rest are not as good. So, I think it's a great kind of female empowerment journey where she ends up at the beginning of the first one to the end of the second one.
Without a doubt. Yeah. And I think, and it's like you said, it's like the two biggest women hero in movies were written by James Cameron. I mean, the guy knows how to write women characters. That guy's a phenomenal writer and director, obviously. But I mean, he created, Aliens is it's more of an action movie, but it's more of like where Ripley is like the badass. The first one's more of a horror movie. The second one's more like Ripley's the badass. And Terminator 2, man, Sarah Connor is the badass. Like, playing opposite Schwarzenegger, and she kind of went down in history as, like, I think if you were to ask who's the biggest badass in movie history, I think Sarah Connor would be number one. Maybe Ripley. It's a flip flop type situation, but yeah, solid flicks. So, you want me to get into mine?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Mine is nowhere near as I was just trying to think about female fronted movies and movies that are, mostly female. And I was torn between, I could have went with the movie I know you've seen, which would have been Mean Girls, but I went with another one of my childhood favorite movies, which you probably have not seen. It's called Troop Beverly Hills. Nope. All right. So this is another one from the 80s. It's about Shelley Long, if you know who Shelley Long is. She was on Modern Family, Cheers, obviously. But she plays like a spoiled, rich Beverly Hills woman and her daughters and the Girl Scouts. And the movie is all about how she takes over her daughter's Girl Scout troop, and it's all these like rich, uppity girls, and then there's the other Girl Scout troops hate them because they don't take it as seriously or whatever. And it's a Girl Scout movie, and it's one of my favorites. And I just watched it not long ago because I showed it to they're my nieces. They're like my best friend for like 30 years, his daughters. So they're, I'm Uncle Brad. They're my nieces. And I showed it to them recently, and they loved it, man. It's just another great PG rated kids movie from my childhood.
So do you think they probably took some good lessons away from it? That they learned a little something they liked the movie. They thought it was good.
I think so. I mean, it is a movie about not judging a book by its cover, really, because it's about, she seems like she's just this rich, a stereotypical Beverly Hills rich person. And, through the movie, she learns how to, make it on her own. And the girls, really, they all have their different backgrounds, that their parents are, involved in movies, or one's like an international gun smuggler or something in a nice PG rated movie. Something like that, but I might have made up the gun smuggling thing, but he's involved in something. And it's just I would say it's one of those movies, man, that if you have girls, I don't know, are there any other Girl Scout movies that you can think of? I don't
Girl
think
Scout
there are.
specific ones, not off the top of my head, but it's never too early to get them started on some good, kind of female empowerment, female-led movies. So it's good that you were able to show that to them.
All right, so the next story on this list is something that was just announced this week, whereas it's a story that you probably thought would have been announced 10 years ago, which is Seth Rogen started his own cannabis business. Like I said, Seth Rogen and weed, it's kind of like synonymous as with weed and Snoop Dogg or weed and Willie Nelson or whatever. It's like those are kind of the three people you think of when you think of weed. And people, even if you don't smoke weed, those are like the three people that if anybody was like, if they said, "Will you smoke with me?" You'd be like, "Yeah, yes, I will." So, what'd you think about the story?
I mean, good for him. He said that he had been wanting to do this for a long time. So, it's almost kind of like a dream or a passion of his. So good for him that he's finally kind of able to do it. And I'm sure from name recognition alone, people will buy into it and kind of help his business out. So I'm sure it'll be just fine. And if not, obviously he's got money to fall back on if the business fails. But good for him that he was able to do something that he likes and kind of form a business that he's proud of, that he wants to be a part of.
So with that, the story in itself was interesting to me, but I just wanted to go with kind of like I went with one of my favorite Seth Rogen movies, which you guys known for comedies or whatever. But for me, my favorite movie of his is one of my all-time favorites, in my top 10 all-time, and that's a movie called 50-50. Mm-hmm. And it's a movie based on a true story about Seth Rogen. One of Seth Rogen's buddies, the guy who actually wrote the movie, was diagnosed with cancer, and the movie is about that journey of him being diagnosed with cancer. And Seth Rogen in the movie, honestly, I thought he should have been like up for awards for his performance. I thought he was phenomenal. There's a scene where they show a book he's reading, which is how to deal with cancer, when your friend has cancer. And that scene always draws a tear for me. And yeah, Joseph Gordon-Levitt just knocking it out of the park. The guy's such a great actor. Obviously, Anna Kendrick's in it, so I'm just predisposed to liking it. But for one, have you seen it?
I haven't seen 50-50, but I know of it. I know what it's about, and I know the kind of true story that it's based on. So it's basically everything you could know without having watching the movie yet. So, what would you kind of classify this as? Is because it sounds more like a drama, but obviously there are probably some comedy elements to it, which I'm sure is hard to pull off in a story like this. Kind of break it down for people about what kind of genre this falls under.
I guess you would call it a dramedy, is what most people, kind of throw it under, which is, it is hilarious because of the dynamic between Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Seth Rogen. It's just like, it's a friendship dynamic that kind of like me and my buddies have, where you bust each other's balls, you do stuff like that. And it's Seth Rogen. He kind of like tries to use his friend's diagnosis as a way for him to like meet women in bars and stuff, and so those like comedic dynamics are in there. But it is also a pretty serious movie about Angelica Houston's in it. She plays the mother of Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, who's dealing with her son who has cancer, and her husband is like in dementia or Alzheimer's, so she's dealing with all this stuff. And Angelica Houston's one of the all-time great actresses, so obviously she's phenomenal in it. And it's a movie that could have been extremely heavy, but because it's a Seth Rogen and it's a comedy and the way it was made, it's another movie where I would say it's damn near perfect.
Fair enough. I mean, it's got to be tough to balance that blend of humor in a movie like this with that subject material, but I went a little bit lighter with my movie pick. Obviously, Seth Rogen movie, a lot of good comedies in there. And I had trouble picking one for this, but ultimately I landed with The 40-Year-Old Virgin. And, Seth Rogen, who was kind of a supporting character in that, the main character was kind of played by Steve Carell, and this movie kind of put him on the map a little bit with that. But still a hilarious side part for him in this one. Pretty early on in his career, not the earliest, but he wasn't exactly a household name quite yet, but, this is another one of those really good mid-2000s Judd Apatow comedies. There was a wave of them, and this one, I think it still holds up. I think it's hilarious. Steve Carell just plays his part great. I'm sure you love this comedy as well.
It's a top 5 all-time comedy for me. And as you can see, I get my friends call me the 40-year-old virgin all the time because of my sweet figure collection and my collection back here.
Yeah, now that you mention it, it's almost like the same layout where you kind of have all the different figures in boxes and everything. So that is kind of like a funny comparison.
Oh yeah. I would say in a given week, I'm called the 36-year-old virgin quite often. It's not apt, but it's what I get called. because my friends, they're great people. It is the ending of that movie, dude, where they break out into the song. I die laughing. I think that part is so hilarious, man.
Yeah, that's one of those things where there's a whole kind of article, like, if you search for it online, there are random articles about this that say the best music scenes that come out of nowhere in movies. And this is one of those. It's not a musical, but it's just one of those movies that has this random musical number in it, and it's always funnier when you're not expecting it. And that was definitely the ending of this, and it was funny. It did kind of add to the comedy and almost kind of wrapped up the movie in a funny way to kind of lead into the credits.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, yeah, and that was the first movie I think you ever saw Kat Dennings, so I'm a big fan of since then, and it's just it's a movie, it's a comedy movie that no matter how many times you've seen it, it's still hilarious.
Yeah, it's good for laughs over and over again. And I completely forgot Kat Dennings was even in that until you said it. So that must have been really on in her career. And just to give you another example of that random musical number in movies, another example of that is kind of like 500 Days of Summer, where you just have this random musical number, but it adds this kind of funny comedic layer to it that you weren't expecting. So 40-Year-Old Virgin, just great comedy, always makes me laugh.
Would you say that's your favorite comedy, or
no? That would really take some thinking to narrow it down and figure out what my favorite comedy is, because comedies are great in different ways, different styles of humor, different kinds of performances. So that would be a tough one to kind of almost like comparing apples to oranges.
Oh yeah, but without a doubt, for me, it's a top five comedy all time.
So if you've been on the internet in the past week, you've seen this story where people are split, but maybe not quite so down the middle, about a pizzeria in Iowa created a Fruit Loops pizza. So it's not exactly what you would think. It's not tomato sauce, cheese, and Fruit Loops on top. It's made with it's more sweet elements, and it's kind of made without the tomato sauce. So it's not exactly a traditional pizza with Fruit Loops sprinkled on top, but it has people a little split on how great this is. And I'll just say my opinion first, where pizza for me, I don't really want Fruit Loops on it, so this seemed a little strange to me. And I see you don't really look like you're a fan of it either.
No, so you pull up the article, and the picture actually looks kind of like delicious in terms of like a dessert pizza. And then you realize, because I thought the white was like frosting or some sort of like honey bun glaze, and I'd be on board with that, because like that's just a delicious treat, sweet treat. But then I read the article, and yeah, there's no tomato sauce, but there is mozzarella cheese, and that's where you lost me, and that's where like my stomach started churning on this article, because that's disgusting. Who wants mozzarella cheese with Fruit Loops?
Yeah, I don't think it's as disgusting as you might, but I just feel like it's a really odd pairing and probably an odd sensation eating it. Just things that don't really go together. So I don't think I would hate this, but it's definitely odd.
Yeah, I try to keep an open mind in terms of stuff, but that's something where somebody's like, "You want to try this?" I'm like, "No, I'm good. Just go grab me a slice of pepperoni."
So to wrap up talking about the story really quick, this is like a classic, split on this, people when they talk about it. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
Hell no. I don't like pineapple in real life, but no, I'm not an adventurous person like that. I don't like a Hawaiian pizza at all.
No, me neither. I don't like pineapple on my pizza. So so for this one, I kind of ABC'd it a little bit, where I went from A to B to C to kind of connect the movie to this. And, Toucan Sam, mascot of Fruit Loops, he's a cartoon character. A great example. You see Fruit Loops commercials, cartoon characters mixing with kids in real life. A great example like that is Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Cartoon characters interacting with real life people. And this movie, people don't, I think, give it enough credit for how groundbreaking it was to try to do the interactions between the actors and the cartoon characters, and the effects with the way that lighting kind of played on the cartoon characters. And people had to do that behind the scenes and how they interacted with real life objects. And I feel like this movie doesn't get enough credit for that.
Um, I it's one of my favorites. Again, we're picking solid flicks this week. It actually, when the movie came out, '88, I think I might be a year or two off on that, but the Oscars created its own. They gave it a special award. They because the movie was so groundbreaking, they essentially created an Oscar to give to them as a way of saying, "Yeah, you guys did something. You guys did something groundbreaking with this." So it may have over time been forgotten or been, the scope of what they did may have been lessened in recent years with how much they do that type of mixture. Even Pokemon, whatever we discussed is kind of like that. But when it was released in '88, man, people took notice, man. They created their own Oscar just to give them, to say you did something special with this movie.
And deservedly so. And, to give you a kind of couple bits of trivia about this, there's a saying in the animation circles called the swinging light effect, or the light swinging light bulb effect, something to that degree, where there's a scene in the movie where, the main character is interrogating Roger Rabbit, and, he hits his head on a light in the room, which causes it to swing back and forth. And they had to capture the effect of that swinging light on Roger Rabbit and how that would look on a cartoon and make it seem like he's actually there in real life in that scene. So it's a saying where they really went above and beyond to kind of capture that and make it, realistic and make it fit into the scene and really kind of fold it in and make it seem like it was a part of that, where they were just holding a camera shooting that cartoon character in real life.
Yeah, and that's I think it's a Robert Zemeckis directed movie. And that guy, he's the guy who did Back to the Future, Forrest Gump and all that. The guy, for my money, one of the best directors ever. He back in the '80s, man, he was making those movies that were just groundbreaking. As that's the word, I think that's the word of the day when it comes to Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It is groundbreaking, and it holds up, man. Yeah. It works as a film noir kind of movie. It works as a kid's animated movie. It works as a comedy. It just works. It's just a great movie.
Yeah, it definitely still holds up. And just to give you one more bit of trivia for this one, there's a scene in it where Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse appear together on screen. And when they were kind of going through the different characters that were able to appear in this movie, they said that if they were going to do that, have Bugs Bunny and or Mickey Mouse in the movie, that they had to appear on screen at the same time. And obviously, nowadays, maybe it was different back then, but Mickey Mouse is a Disney character. Bugs Bunny is a Warner Brothers character. Do you think that's the last time we're going to see both of those characters together on screen was in this movie?
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, probably. I know that you have Space Jam coming up, but I don't think Disney's going to be involved in that at all. It's a Warner Brothers. I'm trying to think of Ready Player One. You remember that movie? They did a lot.
I don't think either of them are in that, but yeah, I think this might be the last time you see those two characters, Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny, together on the same screen, which is kind of crazy. These two iconic cartoon characters.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting. I never thought about it. Eventually Disney's going to own everything anyway. It's the way we're going. All right, so with my movie, I just went with the movies about pizza. And I was like, who likes pizza? And I was like, who likes pizza? Those Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze. Which, have you seen the Turtle movies?
I have, not in a long time. I think it was just the first two way back when I was a kid.
Okay, yeah. The third one's not as good. They go to Japan. It was decent, but not great. But the first Turtles movie, if you remember it all, was super. It was serious. It was really dark for a kids movie. And then I think they took that, and with the second one, they had to have taken criticisms from the first one being so dark. Because the second one was super light, and it's it's funnier. It's got a sweet Vanilla Ice song in it, Ninja Rap, and it's just if you're gonna talk about pizza, man, you gotta go with the Turtles because that's what they love. Michelangelo, he's all about the turtles. But speaking of, let's ask, who's your favorite turtle?
I'll talk about the movie in a second, but my favorite was always Leonardo because I always liked the leaders in like cartoons, TV shows, movies, because I kind of saw myself in them the most. I always liked to be a leader, so Leonardo was definitely my favorite. Plus, he had the cool swords.
Oh yeah, I'm a Michelangelo guy all the way because I'm a smartass, and that's what he was.
I mean, how do you not like Mikey? But I will say, talking about the movie, I'm probably in the minority for this, but I actually wasn't a huge fan of these Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies, even when I was a kid. I grew up watching the late '80s cartoon. There have been so many iterations, so many cartoons of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles since then, but I grew up watching the late '80s, early '90s one, and I thought it was fantastic, and I still do. Going back and watching it, I think it's a great representation of those characters. But you know, I wasn't super drawn into the movies when they came out as a kid. I'm like, this isn't as great as the cartoon, and it's just, and I still feel that way. Over time, it really hasn't kind of changed, and like, they're probably better suited for animation because I didn't really mind the Michael Bay ones as much as some people did. I thought they were pretty good, but to each their own.
I enjoyed the Michael Bay movies for what they were, but yeah, I don't think they can touch the originals. And perhaps again, it's childhood nostalgia for me. I remember going to the theater to see the first one with my mom and dad, and just and my brother, my mom, dad, and my brother. I think, and all of us just it was one of the first movies where I remember waiting in line to get into the theater, and this was 1990, so 2 years pre-Mitch, but it's I can watch those movies all the time. And apparently, I think they're doing another reboot of the franchise or something. So we'll see. All right. So my last story of this week is a story about there were three people who were recently rescued from a deserted island, a stranded island, and they they survived on coconuts for 33 days, which would probably just make me kill myself anyway if I had to survive on coconuts for 33 days. I'd probably lose a lot of weight at that point. But just an interesting story about how people, you know, went missing and were found. That's kind of where I took it from.
Yeah, you almost find it hard to believe these days when you hear a story like this that people are able to go missing for that long without being found, or that they found a corner of the world where people weren't. It's pretty miraculous to hear a story like this. But this always brings up the conversation of people like to ask each other, would you be able to survive on a deserted island by yourself? And if you think so, for how long? Let's hear your answer first.
I mean, I made the joke I'd kill myself. That was obviously a joke. Do I think I could? I feel like I could, although I'm not a bug guy and I'm not a snake guy. So if I saw a snake, I'd just run away like a girl. I'd probably have to build myself a nice hammock up in the trees, but snakes can get up in trees. So I feel like I could, nice break away from society would be nice. But maybe the stress of like, am I ever going to be rescued would maybe eat away at you if you were actually like lost on a deserted island. It's
Yeah,
and eating
I think for me, it would take some trial and error to figure out how to survive. But maybe by the time I figured out how to build a good shelter and how to sustain myself, that it might be too late. So I'm not sure if I'd be able to survive in that type of environment. But I'm with you where it would certainly be peaceful, to kind of be quiet and kind of away from people a little bit. But with a story like this, I really hope we pick the same movie on this one. I mean, there is a clear cut movie that relates to this story. So let's hear yours. Let's hear what you pick first.
I mean, with an intro like that, I feel like we must have picked the same movie. So we'll just say it. Castaway?
Castaway.
Castaway it is. And Tom Hanks, my favorite actor. And this movie, one of his best performances ever, because it's essentially 2 hours of Tom Hanks acting against Tom Hanks.
Yeah, I mean, when I picked out a story for this article, Castaway, clear choice relating to this story, and I actually went back and watched it for the first time in a while during the week after I, kind of read this story. And, it's like you said, it's just Tom Hanks just anchoring the movie, just having to act and keep people interested for almost the entire movie just by himself on a deserted island. And, going into that movie, if you would tell people by the end of it that they would possibly cry over a volleyball being lost, they would have said you were crazy. But, Wilson, that's like an all-timer that gets people welling up.
Oh yeah, man. And that's the genius of Tom Hanks, is that he can make you care about an inanimate object. Uh, and the interesting tidbit about this movie was, so they filmed all the I believe it was the opening and closing, or the opening of the movie where Tom Hanks was a little bit bigger or whatever and didn't have the beard or anything. And then they had to break for like 9 or 10 months so Tom Hanks would go lose weight, grow the beard. And in that time, Robert Zemeckis, who directed Castaway and who also directed, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, went off and shot the movie What Lies Beneath with Harrison Ford and Michelle Pfeiffer, using essentially the same crew as Castaway. I just find that interesting. The guy was just like, you know what, I could take 9 months and just chill out, or I can go make another movie. Granted, the movie wasn't like his best movie. It's a decent supernatural movie, but it's just interesting. And then they came back and shot the rest of the movie, and it's Helen Hunt. The scene where he's back, and it's just, that's the genius of Tom Hanks, man. Is like, that guy makes you feel the humanity of him. He's one of the people I wrote a paper on, like my love of Tom Hanks.
Yeah, I mean, just to bring it back around, Robert Zemeckis directed this movie, and also obviously ones that we've talked about earlier in the episode. But it kind of made me wonder how they pulled off that process, because in the movie he's a little bit heavier at the beginning, and then by the end, he's super skinny because he's been on the island all that time, and he has a big kind of natural beard. So it's really interesting to me too, kind of how they do that and kind of plan that out and shoot it. So. Not only was the Wilson scene kind of heartbreaking, but I mean, going back and watching that for the first time in a while, I forgot just how heart-wrenching the ending was too, because, spoilers, but it's a 20-plus-year-old movie. I mean, it's Castaway if you don't really know about it, But, it's really sad how he can't go back to his fiance or his girlfriend or whatever they were at the start of the film, because they both know, she has a family and she can't leave them.
Yeah, that is great. I love I believe the movie ends on, isn't it the crossroads where he's looking at the map? And I think that's a great metaphor for that movie with Tom Hanks or whatever. It's just like the simplicity of, it's just a street, but it's like, no, man, that's a crossroads. That's where Tom Hanks is at, and at the end of that movie, where does he go next?
Yeah, it's a pretty great metaphor. It could be a little bit on the nose, people might say, but I think it lets them end the movie on a hopeful note and say that the possibilities are still out there for him to continue to live his life and to have other purposes. So I think it's a good way to kind of close out the movie and show, in a way, kind of where his mind's at and the direction that he decides to take.
Yeah, and the last tidbit I'll give on that is, Robert Zemeckis was once asked what was in the package that he delivered. The package he held onto in that movie that he had to deliver as the FedEx man he was. And Zemeckis answered it was a waterproof satellite phone.
Yeah, that's a long running joke. Like, it was just a handful of survival supplies, in the package. Yeah. But I think it's better that they didn't answer that question, that they just kind of let viewers imagine whatever it was, because it wasn't about what was in the box. It was just the symbolism of it, just a really well-crafted movie. So obviously an event from the past week, not quite as big as the Oscars, although obviously there was still a lot of people that tuned in, was the Golden Globes were handed out this past Sunday. And, not the Sunday of what day before this episode airs, but the Sunday before, a little bit confusing since we tape these episodes on Friday. But, obviously awards were given out. And, while we won't go through the entire ceremony, one that we wanted to highlight was Chadwick Boseman winning the Golden Globe for his performance in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, obviously after his death. And, these types of awards, when they're given out for this situation, it always hits harder. And, it's just really a powerful moment. And I was glad that he was able to win this, of course.
I agree. Not only I thought the speech his wife gave was the best speech of the. I mean, her speech was so good because it wasn't forced. It was. I love the way she phrased it. She said he would have said he would have. The way she phrased it, man, was so. I loved it. I thought it was phenomenal. And having lost people in my own life, people I'm very close to, I understood the emotion that she was going through in that moment. I mean, you felt bad. It was bittersweet. I mean, that is what that term is there for. It was the man is finally being recognized for his work. Granted, I believe he should have been nominated when he was Jackie Robinson for 42, but he's finally and so that's kind of where I came from it as, which was I just watched Ma Rainey this past week, and I think when it comes with him, Bozeman he's going to win the Oscar. He's going to win, and I think a lot of that, when somebody passes away and they give a decent performance in a movie, then it goes on to win an Oscar. A lot of people will say, "Oh, that's the sentimental vote." He got it because it's his last chance to win an Oscar. But I watched Ma Rainey, dude. Even if he hadn't passed away, he would have been winning the Oscar this year. He's that good in the movie.
Yeah, it's just such a shame that we won't get to see more from him, because I feel like he just had so much more to offer, and he was going to do so well in the roles that he would have gotten in the future. And it's just, it still hits hard. And, that kind of leads into my movie pick, and we might have the same movie on this one, maybe. But, for a lot of people, they knew him for his more popular role as Black Panther in the movie. So, that was the movie I kind of picked to relate to this story. And, I certainly maybe didn't know enough about him before this came out, but it made me want to go back and see different movies that he was in before this, because this was far from his first movie that he was in, or project, TV show. But, he certainly obviously did a great job in this, just projecting this sense of regality, and just, he really seemed like a king, and just, he really kind of, it was just a really well-made movie with everybody, but he was the focal point, the anchor to everything. And, he did such a great job in this. And I absolutely think Disney is taking the right approach by not trying to recast or bring his character back in the sequel, that they're tastefully saying just, we're going to focus on other things in the sequel, because I'm glad that they're doing a sequel to kind of celebrate, the stories of, the people that are represented in that movie, but they're shying away from anything with Chadwick, because it still is a really sore subject for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, Black Panther is a phenomenal movie. I think it was one of the first Marvel movies where people said that the villain in the movie, Michael B. Jordan, it's like, if you actually look at the movie, like, he is the villain of the movie. He ain't that bad. I mean, his character is like, he's just talking about how he felt abandoned. And it's like, you related to that villain. And I think a big criticism from the Marvel movies was a lot of the villains were kind of one-dimensional. And I think Black Panther, there may have been a couple before, one or two before maybe, but Michael B. Jordan in Black Panther was like the first Marvel villain where people like, that was a fully fleshed, you felt his reasoning in the terms of that movie.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that, the depth that they went through with his character and his argument. One of those movies where maybe the villain is right, and obviously he had a really good performance in that movie as well. But, I'm really glad when this movie came out that people really turned out for it, because, this longtime belief that when you have a minority-led movie, it doesn't do as well at the box office, it doesn't make as much money. And I'm so glad that this kind of, proved that wrong, where if there were people still out there that think that people really showed up to watch this movie. It made over $1 billion. A sequel was inevitable, but going into it, they weren't sure how it would do at the box office. But I'm glad that people showed that one isn't exclusive to the other. It's not pick one. It's people will show up to a movie if you create a powerful story about a minority character.
I agree, and I think that's one of Marvel's great strengths is the talent they pick behind the camera. As this is a Ryan Coogler movie, and Ryan Coogler, for my money, is one of the best writer directors out there right now. I don't know if you saw Fruitvale Station or Creed. The guy is phenomenal. I love that guy's work, and I'll watch anything he writes or has a hand in because he's that good. I am just an absolute fan of Ryan Coogler.
Yeah,
And
news actually just came out that they're doing a Wakanda TV show that he's going to be behind on Disney Plus. That's going to tell stories about Wakanda. And I'm with you where he's absolutely a great filmmaker. I absolutely love Creed, and he's done some great stuff so far. Obviously Black Panther, but I can't wait to see what comes next from that guy too.
yeah, and to swing it back to Boseman, man, it's like Boseman was known. He took on some heavy roles, man. He played Jackie Robinson. He played James Brown. He played T'Challa. You might want to cut that. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. T'Challa. He played the Black Panther, and but he also, one of my favorite movies of his. This isn't my pick, but was Draft Day, and he's more of a comedic role in that movie, and he's so great in that movie. So I watch it every year on Draft Day because I'm a tool. But it's one of those movies that maybe a lot of people didn't know Chadwick Boseman was in. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen Draft Day yet, but I have that, since you mentioned it so many times, I have that on that list of movies that I have written down that aren't really on a streaming service that I will get to one day. It's like a handful of them, movies that I want to see that aren't really out there. So, I will get to that one eventually. But, did we pick the same movie again on this one, or did you kind of go with something different?
We didn't. I went with Ma Rainey's Black Bottom because that's the movie he won for, and I just watched it this past week. And I'm a fan of August. Well, I don't know if you saw Fences, phenomenal movie with Denzel Washington, Viola Davis. August Wilson, man, that guy has a gift for dialogue. He writes some of the best dialogue I've ever heard, just powerful. And when it's acted by Denzel and Chadwick Boseman, Viola Davis, man, they bring it, man, in these roles. That's why they're nominated. It's why Viola Davis won the Oscar for Fences, and she'll probably be up again for Ma Rainey. And these movies are based on plays, so they're essentially one room, two room stories. Movies that don't have to make big scenery changes. And so in Ma Rainey, a lot of it just takes place in a room with the band. And the first scene where this band is together with Chadwick Boseman and these other 3 or 4 guys in the room, it is such a great scene. I absolutely love the scene because it's just firing dialogue, man, firing dialogue. And that's where you really see how great Boseman is, because he goes from he's funny, then he's an ass, and then he's heartbreaking, just all in the span of like 5-10 minutes in that scene.
Yeah, I haven't seen Ma Rainey yet, and I think I will a little bit later in the year, kind of closer to Oscars, when I do this roundup of watching movies that are nominated and which ones we're going to talk about here on the show. But, I'm sure I'm going to like it, and obviously Chadwick Boseman may win the Oscar, already won the Golden Globe for his role, so I'm sure I'll like the movie once I fully check it out.
Yeah. I'm a humble brag. I get to vote in the SAG Awards, and I've already checked the box for Boseman, man. He's my pick. All right, so now we're going to wrap up the show. And I think last week, might have been 2 weeks ago, but Mitch explained kind of, with the depth of new movies coming out, we're going to, if we can talk about a new movie that we both mutually saw, that'll be our go-to. But sometimes you just want to throw on a movie that maybe you haven't seen in a while, and that'll be what we talk about. So we'll just go with the movie of the week. And so this week, I was watching a lot of the nominated movies, and those tend to get a little heavy. So I was like, I want a break from that. I want to watch something funny that I haven't seen in a while. And so I watched the movie Tag, and for me, I absolutely love it. I think it's hilarious. I and it actually isn't all comedy, man. I appreciated it. Like, you can watch it as a surface level movie, which is just funny, haha stuff, or not funny, depending on your opinion of the movie. But I appreciated it because it is a movie about friendship and about friends growing apart in life and finding a way to stay together. So, what are your opinions on it?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with it's kind of just like a turn your brain off movie, which, like, I get it. I get that that's what it's going for, but I thought it was just okay. I thought it was an okay comedy. It tries to be almost kind of like an action comedy for most of it. Because, like, they're all trying to tag Jeremy Renner, and, there are these sequences where it's almost kind of like in Sherlock Holmes, where he kind of calculates things in slow motion and how to deflect them, and it's okay. It's I think the people in it are funny, but I don't think they're as funny as they usually are in this movie, if that makes sense. Like Jake Johnson, John Hamm, Ed Helms, like Hannibal Buress. Like, I think they're funnier in other stuff that they've been in.
Oh man, I could possibly agree with that. I can't off the top of my head. Hannibal Buress in that movie is hilarious, man. He delivers one liners in this movie that are cracked me up, man. And I think that's why I think I got the ending of the movie really brings it all together, and it does for me at least. It gave a little tug at the heartstrings, man, with that ending, and it brought it together in terms of friendship. And I'm not sure if you are in this type of situation, but it's, for me, I have my close group of friends, my group of friends I've known for 30 some years. And we've all gone, not our separate ways. We still have our group text where we talk to each other every single day pretty much. But, I went to college in Florida, and then I lived out in LA for a while. One of my buddies he went to New York to go to law school, and he just got accepted. He's going to be a JAG attorney. So he's moving to Georgia for a while. Another buddy lives in Virginia with his wife and his daughters and everything. So we've all gone. We're not down the street anymore. It used to be when we were younger. It'd be like, hey, you want to come play basketball down the street? And I'm like, yeah, let's go. And so we've all grown apart, and that's why I appreciated this movie so much, because I thought it rang true to that. You got to work. You got to work at keeping your friends together.
Sure, I think that's a good lesson to take away from this. With the movie itself, for me, the dramatic kind of bits of it towards the end maybe didn't hit as hard. I appreciated what they were going for, but I would say there are other comedy movies where they kind of have a dramatic kind of tie everything together moment towards the end, and it works a little bit better in other movies. But I still think it's an okay comedy. You could certainly do worse, but I'm not sure it landed quite as high as they were aiming for with this. But, for those of you who don't know, this was actually based off of a real life story where there is a group of friends in real life that have been friends for a long time that live in different parts of the country that play an annual game of tag where for 1 month out of the year, they'll try and tag each other and, see who ends up as like the loser by the end of the month. So I almost was kind of more fascinated with the real life story behind this than the actual movie.
Yeah, the real story. I mean, I appreciated that the tagline for the movie is based on a true story. We're not kidding, because it's an interesting thing. But I had one question which relates back towards that, which is, are you live in Maryland now, but you're from Pennsylvania area or whatever originally. So are you kind of the first of your maybe hometown childhood friends that kind of moved away or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I'll get to that in a second, but just wrapping up about the real life friends, if you're looking to kind of watch a video or see their story, if you kind of look it up, the story behind Tag, ESPN actually did a short story about them on SportsCenter, and you can find the kind of video that they did online for that, kind of depicting their story. But yeah, I will say, this was something that you kind of think about during the pandemic, where you take stock of who your close friends actually are and who you want to keep in touch with. And, it kind of makes me sad sometimes that life kind of, interferes and you drift apart from people that you used to be really close with. But I will say I do still have a group of friends that I'm really close with from my hometown. We went to high school together, and we're all still friends. And we're all kind of scattered to the wind in different states. Only one of the four of us is kind of left still in Pennsylvania. The rest of us are kind of scattered around the country. But I really like how we still find ways to get together and still make it a priority to spend time together. Of course.
Yeah, and I think that's that's why I love tag. I think, and it makes me laugh, but it's also makes you think. I enjoy tag. So if we were Siskel and Ebert, would this be a thumbs up, thumbs down situation? Are you slightly thumbs up, or where are you?
Yeah, if to give like a modern metaphor, for people that might actually know what we're talking about, it's like on Netflix where you give like something a thumbs up or a thumbs down. There's no more stars anymore, like how it used to be. It's just yes or no. And I'll say I give this movie a thumbs up, but barely. I don't think it's horrible. I just don't think it's the best comedy out there. But I like that you like it and what it was going for with the message that it was trying to say.
Yeah. Well, thanks for making me feel old. So on that note, we'll wrap this week's episode up. Once again, thank you for listening. If you're listening, if you're watching, thank you for watching. We definitely appreciate it. This was bred out of a way for Mitch and I just to get together and talk about movies, because that's essentially what we did, man. We would text each other after we watched the movie and be like, hey, did you see this movie? And we'd talk for like, an hour through text about how much we did or didn't enjoy the movie. So it was kind of a way for us to just make it more official. Hopefully we pick some movies for you to go out and check during the week. Anything you want to add to that, Mitch?
Yeah, just to make listeners and viewers' lives a little bit easier, I'm going to link to the video that ESPN did about the Friends Behind the Real Life tag game in the description if you're watching this on YouTube. So, feel free to check that out, save you an extra step, save you a little bit of research.
There you go. Yeah, thank you everybody for watching, listening, doing all that good stuff. If you enjoy it, tell your friends. We're not trying to be famous. We just want to be rich. So, all right, everybody, take it easy.